If parenthood came with a GPS, it would most likely just say recalculating. Join Yolandi Becker and her guest experts Wednesdays at 11 a.m. for Bump and Beyond, the show about pregnancy and babies. 101.9 megahertz of life.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm in studio today, not doing it from home, and I'm in studio with a bang. Mind the pun, more on this later. This week's show is going to be, let me rather say, a little bit below the belt. So if you have kids, especially small kids in the vicinity, I would suggest that you rather listen to the podcast later. Because today's topic is like money. No one's really keen to talk about it because they think everyone else has more of it. And that's what we're talking about today, sex. We're going to be talking about. I'm a little bit nervous, I have to say, because I've never had a response to a promo to a show as what I had the last couple of days about people, is the podcast going to be available? When can I listen to it? When is the show? So I am slightly nervous, but we're not just talking sex here. We're talking specifically sex after becoming a parent. And this is often not just a neglected topic between communities. No one talks about it. It's a very taboo subject sometimes to talk about, especially in religious communities. But it's often also, unfortunately, a topic that isn't often discussed even between partners. There's so many things before kids that we think about and discuss. Financial situation. I mean, that I guess is also another topic we can talk about that people don't properly talk about beforehand. But there's so many topics that we discuss before we get married, before we have kids, and this is something that is unfortunately not often. And it can leave your relationship strained if it's not discussed, especially expectations and the impact it might have. Of course, I've got 2 kids. I know there is a period after children that you can expect less intimacy and sex, of course. But then you also have this assumption that eventually, my kids are already 9 and 11, that eventually it's going to pick up again. But according to a survey carried out by Family Lives, parents having the least sex are the ones who have children of teenagers. I mean, obviously, these are a little bit older people, so maybe that also has something to do with it. But 66% of the respondents had that had teenage or older children followed those with children aged between 5 and 12, 49% of them. Clearly, these parents aren't struggling with sleep deprivation anymore. It's older children, but they are saying that they're having less sex. So they don't care for a newborn again. What's happening here? Many seem to a large extent to have given up on their sex life. So maybe that's what's happening. After such a long drought, maybe you just lose interest. I don't know. But even more interesting and to keep in mind is the following survey. A recent Children's Society survey found that 70% of children report that their parents having a good relationship makes them happy, whilst only 30% of parents recognized that this was the case. The message is clear. Strengthening your relationship isn't a selfish thing to have. It benefits the whole family. And while sex isn't the be-all and end-all, it's often a barometer for the true state of your relationship. So if you don't do it for yourself, I guess the message is clear. Do it for your kids. We need to work on our relationship. So let's get to it. So whether it makes you uncomfortable or not, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about sex with Galya Falkson. She's a sex and relationship specialist coach. So I'm very much looking forward to that conversation.
This is Bump and Beyond with Yolandi Becker, the show about pregnancy and babies. 101.9 megahertz of life.
So if you've just joined me, this is 101.9 Chai FM, Bump and Beyond with me, Yolandi Becker. And today our juicy, spicy subject is our sex lives after children. I want to remind you again, if you have children in the vicinity, it might not be an appropriate topic, so listen to the podcast later. But personally, from my own experience, when it comes to this, before I get into personally, obviously, I want you all to be part of this conversation. So if you have any questions about this, come on, tell us. Be honest about how often it happens. I'll anonymously read out your numbers if you're embarrassed by it. If you're proud of it, of course, you can also share it. Or just how you experienced it, what your expectations are. Maybe you're going to have a baby soon, or you're going to have a second child soon, because that also changes the dynamics a little bit. But share with us. Our telephone number is of course, 010 140 3020. You can phone us. You can also telegram us on 061 895 1019 and SMS us on 34519. SMSs are charged at R1.50. You can, of course, also, if you're in front of a computer, email us at instudio@chaifm.com. We would love to have your input on this topic. Again, like I said, I've got quite a bit of a response beforehand already. So if you have a specific question that you want to talk to our sex coach about, then no sleeping here today. Then, of course, you can phone us or SMS us or even telegram us on 061 895 1019. But this will be available with all our other shows on our podcast, on our website at chaifm.com, and our app, of course, it will be available as well. So my own experience with sex before, obviously sex before children, especially when you have to start making the babies, can be fun, but it can also be, especially if you're struggling, become a little bit of a chore in some ways, I guess. But definitely there was a period, as a woman, after giving birth to my children, I didn't feel that attractive anymore. My body changed quite a bit. Especially down there, the vaginal area. I'm going to call it as it is. Let's not beat around the bush today. Not that I ever do I? Again, mind the pun when I'm saying beating around the bush. But yes, definitely there was a period, especially after, and again, if you're also Jewish, I know there is a period afterwards that you're not going to be having sex. And even if you're not Jewish, there is a period where you're not going to be having sex. I also got cut. I had a vaginal birth with my son, so I got cut and I had stitches, and I didn't even allow my husband close to that traffic accident down there to even remotely look at it, because I was just not comfortable with it. It was just, I didn't even want to look at it. And I didn't feel sexy. I don't feel anything like that. But in the same breath, I can also say during that time that I don't know if my husband was just really nice, but he was really in the way, like doing other ways to keep the intimacy alive. He would rub my feet, rub my back and things like that. So because our love language for sure is physical touch. So sex is a very important part of our relationship as well. So for me, it was a dry period, but when that clock ticked, I was also quite excited to get back into it again. But like any other relationship, we've been married for 14 years now. It has its ups and its downs where we go through better periods when it comes sexually and other periods. But in that same breath, I don't think I've ever been after 14 years, more attracted to my husband or more in love, because I do feel that your sexual relationship can take on a whole different level if you are open about it with communication and things like that. But I'm not the expert. I'm only sharing my own experience in the attempt to hope that all the parents out there are going to be as open as me. Galya already told me she's not so open personally because she's only sharing her expertise, yeah? But I am very happy to introduce, if you haven't seen, you should really go on our Facebook page. She's also a quite attractive woman. But mother, I was actually surprised because she looks so young and she has actually 3 children. So Galya, you look like properly young, I have to say. I'm not going to say how old you are because I don't know, but thanks for joining me, Galya.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start off with, like I said, I kind of shared a little bit. Maybe I overshared, but that is the tendency of this program. I try to be honest. What is the averages? I want to start off with what's the averages of how much sex are people having before children? Because I did read that it definitely is less. But how is the averages before children and after children when it comes to sex?
Well, thank you for having me. There's different research on it and different studies that have been done. But it seems like the overarching thing is that there is less sex being had after children have been born. Some, up to 50%, said that it was not so much less, but 38% of people, according to the study that I read last, said that it was much less sex than before. So there is obviously something that is happening once the children have come into the parents' lives.
Okay, so before we get into that a little bit more of what the reasons could be, because I think it is important to understand that as well. Let's first, because like I said, there is a period, obviously, that after birth that you're not going to be having sex. Whether you had natural or vaginal birth or cesarean birth, I think there will be a period. I mean, I joke always to new moms when I see them, and it's probably not the greatest joke, I have to say that as well, but in the end of the day, I always say that before you go in to give birth to your baby, you put your dignity in a little suitcase. And then about 6 to 8 weeks later, you can take half of it out. And then another 2 months later, you can take the rest out. Because there is a lot of grossness that happens after giving birth to your body that I don't feel people are properly talking about. The amount of blood that comes out is unnatural in some ways. There's a reason why you have to pack one of those like linen saver nonsense when you go to birth. And they could have said adult diaper for all I know. But yes, how soon after birth can you start having sex?
So just to add, I have a very different opinion, so to speak, or take with the whole birthing process. I think that it's actually miraculous and beautiful.
It is!
And the blood and all of the things that come from it is just part of the process. And like, if anything, yes, it's uncomfortable and your body's gone through a massive adjustment, and it's not a simple thing. It's really not. Like the fact that we have modern medicine today to allow women to come out of birth alive and their children, it's just unreal, like what can happen. And I often think about like how difficult it must be to see that whole process as nothing more than just annoying. It must be so difficult to be in that space if there's a part of you that can maybe tap into the miraculousness of it and the beauty and the
that's why we do it again.
Perfection that it can bring into your life. I mean, perfection is not the right word, but yeah, just to add that.
I can't wait to get more into that just now.
So you asked the question, when can you start having sex before?
Yes, we're going to go into that just after this ad break because Craig is showing me signs here of taking a break.
This is Bump and Beyond with Yolandi Becker, the show about pregnancy and babies. 101.9 megahertz of life.
You are on 101.9 Chai FM, and this is Bump and Beyond with me, your host, Yolandi Becker. And if you've just joined us, you are joining the wonderful conversation where we're talking with Galya Falkson. She's a sex and a relationship coach about specifically sex after pregnancy or after birth, maybe more than one child. And before we went to break, Galya, you were telling me about the miraculousness of birth, and I agree. I do have to say that sometimes I can paint a grim picture about everything, but like I said, there's a reason why we do it twice. And I think in essence for me, that's also, isn't that what motherhood is all about? It's having two completely opposite feelings at the same time all the time, and your body trying to figure it out, or your brain and your heart trying to figure it out. And it is such a beautiful, and we shouldn't forget that. And that's why I love to have guests like that to remind me as well of the beauty of it, because it was. I can tell you, when my son came out, he cried, obviously, and they put him on my chest and he looked up at me, and it was like the most miraculous thing ever. But anyway, I'm segueing here out of topic. The question I asked you beforehand is, how soon after birth can we then start thinking about it?
So doctors recommend 4 to 6 weeks, but while there is no timeline for getting back to sex after birth, I think it's important to reestablish your physical intimacy with your partner in ways that are meaningful for both of you, which means when I say intimacy, I'm not speaking about sex. Intimacy and sex are two very different things, and it actually frustrates me when people use the word intimacy to describe sex, because intimacy is so much more vast than just sex.
Yeah.
It's so much more than that. And
I think, in all honesty, I think that's why when I was saying earlier now, 14 years of marriage, being super in love with my husband and everything like that, I think it's exactly that key, is that it's not just about the sex, it's about the intimacy and the build up to it and the things that surrounding someone doing something for you that you appreciate. But again, so you say 4 to 6 weeks.
That's what doctors recommend. But I think, in my opinion, the best time to have sex after giving birth is when you and your partner are both physically, mentally, and emotionally ready. This means that you have emotional support, you have planned your contraceptives if need be, you've planned how you want to go ahead together in this space, what you've expressed your emotions and your feelings to one another, and that you have that mental and emotional space ready, as well as then obviously the physical. And the physical, we know once you go to your doctor for your 6-week checkup, they can give you the go-ahead or not, depending on what you needed to happen during your birth.
Yes. So that's important, because I was now talking about the grossness that comes with childbirth and whatever, and the physical readiness of it. And it's also now, I'm talking here 9 years ago, but what I recall of this time is that once I was physically ready, I felt ready for it. But that's exactly it. It's not always as simple as just being physically ready. Yeah. Emotionally, I think motherhood, and we're talking now motherhood here because we are mothers, but obviously a father, there's also that side of it, that it changes. I heard a joke once, and I hated the joke, and I can't even remember where I heard it, but the guy was saying, like, when his wife gave birth, it was like his favorite pub burning down. And then I was like, that is the most horrible thing.
It's such rubbish also.
Yeah, it is. And I thought, this is so sad that someone is saying that, because it's hard being pregnant.
But also, sorry, is that what you value your wife for?
Good point. So
men like that need to get taught a lesson.
I like that attitude a lot. But you now said, what are the type of questions or something? How can you emotionally prepare how do you know that you're emotionally ready? Is it just something that you will know? Is it one of those cases where it's like, when in doubt, then you're not ready?
I don't think so. I think that's where increasing your intimacy is important. Start with just basic touch, holding hands, like you said, rubbing each other's feet. You also need to be giving physically to your husband. It can't just be that he's giving to you as well. You can't create intimacy if it's a one-way street. So there has to be like kissing or touching. I would say work your way up. The same way when you meet someone, ideally, we're not thinking about one night stands here. We're talking about ideally when you meet someone, you work your way into getting into a sexual relationship. It starts off with hugging, kissing, holding hands, all those things. That's where you kind of need to start again.
Watch a movie together and just
cuddle. Be together, have a bath together, do things that are somewhat sexual but not completely sexual. That in itself is important in increasing that intimacy again. you said we're not going to get into the obstacles, but there are multiple obstacles that can come up. And like I said, it's for both partners that need to be in the space, both mentally, physically, and emotionally. So not only do women possibly could suffer from a postpartum depression or a postpartum blues, but actually 1 in 10 men suffer from depression during this time too. 1 in 10, that's a lot.
That's
a lot of men that are actually also suffering.
And to be honest, I don't think that it's also a clear reflection. I feel that it must be a lot more than that, in the sense of just because I know personally of people that I know had postpartum depression and never got diagnosed with it. So for me, it's also like I don't feel that that's even an accurate like reflection of what it really is like.
Absolutely.
If you've just joined us, you are on 101.9 High FM, and I am your host, Yolandi Becker, and we're talking sex after having children. We've talked a lot now about creating that intimacy and wanting that sex after children is also it isn't just about. But for me, it's also, personally, it was really the intimacy. For me, it was intimate having a child with that experience
Absolutely.
you have with your partner. And that's how I viewed it. And that's why I'm so ticked off about that joke, is that for me, it brought us so close together in a different way that we've experienced this miracle of something that we've created together and we get to experience together. But it is also hard afterwards because you're tired. There's a lot of different things that happen with your body. Does the type of birth have an impact on like how your readiness? Because I mean, I've never had a cesarean, but I know that it sometimes takes a while before you can walk. Probably you can't drive for 6 weeks and things like that, according to the doctors. Does it have an impact? But I mean, in the same breath, I had vaginal birth. So like I said, I got cut and there were stitches and it was all bruised down there. Does the type of birth have an impact on the sex afterwards?
Yes and no. Okay, so what happens when there's a vaginal birth is that the vaginal tissue, right, the elasticity is affected from that vaginal birth because of the low levels of estrogen in the woman's body. So she may have discomfort, or there may be a period of almost easing back in to having those tissues stretched again. They have gone through somewhat of a trauma. That it is described as a trauma experience for the vagina. But having said that, someone who has a cesarean can also experience painful vaginal sex because there is still that low level of estrogen. There is still the different hormones, depending if she's breastfeeding, etc., that are, being pumped in her body at this point in time. And it's not just about the tissue trauma, right?
No.
It's important to understand that
there's
it has
different
to
things.
do with the hormones, exactly, and the elasticity.
It's like breastfeeding. People think that when you breastfeed, that's what messes up your boobs. It's actually pregnancy that messes it up.
Interesting.
So, same thing.
Yeah.
It's not just the way you do it.
So, people who opt for cesarean over vaginal, there's still that low level of estrogen, which is going to affect the vaginal tissue, elasticity of the vaginal tissue. So it's important to know that they no matter what type of birth you did have, obviously with a vaginal, if there was any cutting or stitching, you do need to be more aware of that. The stitching will have effect, the scar tissue will also affect this elasticity, but that's just about training it again to become elastic again. It's not like the pub burning down. It's actually that makes me angry on many levels, but it's very much about how you treat it afterwards.
And I think for a lot of the treating afterwards, maybe the conversations, like I said beforehand, should be had before you actually have a baby. To have those conversations because naturally, now we talked about women, that things physically change. Obviously, those physical changes, including your emotional changes, will have like an effect on your libido or your sex drive. Does the same thing happen to men?
So men don't have a drop in hormones. But
So they still want to have the same level amount of sex,
No.
and you want to have less,
So-
and then it's not a good time.
Right. So, well, this is the thing. There is that assumption that men want to have more, but we take for granted how men actually do, so to speak, have. They also suffer in this period. It's not like, yes, they don't have the pregnancy, and a lot of women might like get cross with me for saying this, but men go through something too. And actually, the fact that the stats show us that 1 in 10 men suffer from depression post-birth says something very big to us. It's showing us that, he could be having so much pride and joy of becoming a father, but he's also lost his personal independence, the same as you.
Yeah.
And he's also, if he's a first-time dad, he could be struggling with balancing his responsibilities and work. And men have to go back to work straight away, and they're also not sleeping. It's not
And stress
simple.
has a very big effect
And they're
on
looking
libido.
after their wife, and they're looking after her, who's just gone through a massive bodily adjustment and shift, and there could have been trauma, and there could have been so many things. There's a lot of responsibility that he's holding on to, and that he also has not really a space to really speak about his feelings, because he's not going to want to, whether this is right or wrong, he doesn't want to burden his wife, so to speak, with how he's feeling, because he almost feels guilty about that. So we do have to be a little bit more sensitive that men are also having a difficult time. Whether that means women have to completely change their attitude, no. I don't think we have to all of a sudden be like, oh, let's make you dinner because we've just given birth and we need to make you feel better. No, but I do think there has to be a space where he has a support system in place, so that if he is feeling bad, or if there is things going on, if he's not relying on his wife to help him through it, because she can't be that person, but rather family member or a friend or somewhere, and that they've spoken about it before, where, okay, when, babe, I can see that you're feeling between this and this time, and it looks like, okay, this won't happen in the first few weeks, but let's say 6 weeks later, you'll see a little bit of some sort of pattern with the baby, and if you're using your expertise, you'll be able to get the baby to sleep, and there'll be somewhat of a gap where he can say, babe, do you mind if I go out with a friend for a coffee just to chat? Or are you happy with him coming over to the house? We can sit on the balcony. I'll hold the baby monitor if the baby wakes up. But to have a space where they can also emotionally be supported, it's
Yes.
very important. And obviously when she is ready, when her body is, settled a bit more, she can have that conversation again as well with him. They can get back into that space, and that's where the building intimacy comes. It's not just the physical touch that you're building. It's about having conversations again with each other, knowing where each other's heads are at, knowing how each other's feeling, discussing how amazing this baby is and how hard this baby is, and the different experiences both of you are having. One of the biggest realizations for me, and I will get a little bit personal here, is when my husband, when I was giving birth, there was one point in the delivery where he actually walked out the room for a few minutes, and at the time I was like, how could he walk out the room? What kind of husband is he? I'm so upset. And afterwards we spoke about it, and he had said to me that, you know what, it wasn't that he was leaving me. He actually couldn't stand seeing me in so much pain. For him, it was so painful to see the person he loved in so much pain. And I thought that was beautiful. That he felt a connection deep enough with me to feel pain with me. And that old folks tale, where the old man goes to the doctor and they say, what's wrong? And he's like, we both, the wife's in pain. And the old man says, yeah, we both, our foot's sore. Yes, of course, he was not going through birth. And in no way do I think he was experiencing what I was experiencing. But it was beautiful to see that he was tapping into the fact that he felt and cared so much about me that it was hurting him to see me in so much pain. And he actually needed to go out and take a breather before he came back into the room.
Yeah, and come back and be the anchor
Yeah.
during this stormy time. And I think this is kind of also part of the reminder that I want to give people, and to also have these open conversations, first of all, with your partner, but also just a reminder that you're both going through this. And this is, I think, parenthood actually takes your marriage to a different level. It was literally after kids where I started, maybe I should have started it earlier, but that I really realized how this boat is going in the same direction now. There's no, whether or not we stay married forever, we are always going to be part of each other's lives, and we're moving in the same direction together. And for me, that was a beautiful aha moment, because as well, that helped for the intimacy and those type of things and the conversations to be had. But I think that's immediately after birth, that is part of the problem is that I remember this post I see, and every single year on Facebook, I see this memory that pops up. It's now, I think, 13 years old, this post, just when Facebook started, I think. And I actually made a post. I mean, just that I commented that on Facebook was already remarkable. But the post is just like, what a busy day. And every time I read it now, I laugh out loud, because it's like before children, before anything. And I was like, what the hell was I doing with my time? And I think that is, once a child enters your life, that's what it becomes. Lots of the conversations goes around the child and those type of things. And we need to create those spaces where we're talking about us again and ourselves and our role in that. But, Craig, so we're going to have 2 shows today. We'll get into it more just now.
This is Bump and Beyond with Yolandi Becker, the show about pregnancy and babies. 101.9 megahertz of life.
Yes, you are on 101.9 Chai FM with me, Yolandi Becker. And today's show is a spicy one, like I mentioned earlier. And if you've missed it, you can, of course, go listen to our podcast on chaifm.com and, of course, on our app as well. We're talking today with sex and relationship coach Galya Falkson, also mother of 3, that I have to add. Like you guys know, I only interview people who are also parents, because this is a parenting show. And that's the only way you're going to have proper information about it. We've spoken a lot now about all the changes that happen after birth and the impact it can have, obviously, on your relationship and your intimacy. And we've realized intimacy and sex is not the same thing. But one of the things that also often happens is that after you, as a mother, after you give birth, you breastfeed. And breastfeeding comes with its own fun things. It's a beautiful, I mean, honestly, just talking about it, I have to touch my breast, because it's like, I can still feel the milk coming in 9, 11 years later. It's less because obviously I breastfed for quite some time. But that also has an impact on your body. What is the impact on your libido when you're breastfeeding?
Okay, well, there's a few different things here, but after delivery, like we said before, your estrogen levels are going to fall, right? So the levels of 2 hormones that are in your body and being pumped now, prolactin and oxytocin, are going to rise. And these 2 hormones have very different impacts on your body, and each can interfere with your sex drive. The combination of increased prolactin and oxytocin may make you feel great pleasure from breastfeeding. Your emotional and physical intimacy may actually be larger. You may have a more desire for it, but your sex drive may decrease as well, based on the fact that something that was so sexual once in your life has now become food for a child. And there is a bit of a mind shift that you have to almost like kind of work on.
But overall, how are you going to make it more comfortable sex then for you and your partner?
So because your sex drive may decrease with all of these different changes that are happening in your body, there's a few things that you can do. The first thing that I suggest, if you're having sex for the first time now after giving birth, so this is not a few months later, this is the first time. That first time you need to go very, very slowly. I always suggest that the woman be in control. In other words, that she should control the angle, she should control the depth of the penetration, and she should control the movement as well as the speed.
So the woman should be on top.
You could be on top. There's multiple positions that she could be in actually to control it. But yeah, I wouldn't suggest starting with a missionary position, just because there's so much things happening just in your body that you're maybe not aware of, like the fact that your estrogen has fallen and your elasticity has changed. So the more in control she is, the slower she can go, the easier she can control that movement.
Oh.
I also suggest that you don't start with, your partner penetrating you. You start very gently, maybe with a finger, or just going in a direction that almost eases you into penetration. Your body has just gone, especially if it was a vaginal, but like we said, even with cesarean, it can have that effect because of the elasticity being affected.
And I mean, that's also a good way to kind of get things going a little bit. We shouldn't
Exactly.
forget, just because we have children, that you should have some foreplay anyway beforehand.
Yes, but sometimes it's even yourself when you're in the bath. Try putting, a finger inside just to see, okay, how am I feeling? That's part of the discussion that will come up with your partner before you go into the bedroom with him. Where we at, how we feeling. That's part of that emotional discussion we were talking about earlier, of knowing where each other is.
Oh. And exploring your new body yourself again, it's a good idea. We always say that also for younger people.
Yes, absolutely. And contrary to popular belief, a lot of people actually enjoy sex more after birth, due to the fact that giving birth in itself awakens us to a range of different sensations, and as a result our bodies, particularly our genitals, become more alive, increasing our pleasure potential. Childbirth can also shift our internal parts into just the right place, right, to make them more sensitive to stimulation, and many women report more comfort with their bodies and intense orgasms after having sex. So it's just important to know that yes, people are, like we said in the first point of the show, was that how people are having less, but it's actually interesting to see that more women report better sex after children.
Again, I definitely think for women, for me personally as well, it's a lot of emotion involved. And I think, like I said, it's such a beautiful experience that you have with your partner doing this, and it really brought us so much closer. And that's why I think over the years it's actually become better because of that. That serious emotional connection, and you can be open and honest with this person in a whole different level.
Absolutely.
And that's what everyone should strive for. It's a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, because of the increased hormones that are helping you breastfeed, something that can also help increase the just natural lubrication in the vaginal area, but also the desire and the arousal for sex, is just sensual touch. So to give each other sensual massages, or touching for the husband to gently touch her breasts in a way that is not got to do with breastfeeding. So you're not going to squeeze, or you're not going to do anything like too intense. You're going to just gently caress, maybe just with the tip of the finger, or breathing just on that area to change that pattern in her brain for her, so it's no longer she's the cow. I know that's always used, that she becomes the cow, but actually she's still a sexual being, and her sexuality is very much who she is. And you also mentioned, the discomfort and the feeling of not so happy within our bodies because it's changed and shift. And I want to say this, and I hope women hear this when I say it, that sexuality is way more than being able to wear a sexy slinky dress and look sexy. It's actually about having a powerful body, knowing that you have this powerful body and that can do absolutely incredible, wonderful things. It just birthed a child.
Yes, you just
grew a child. In the end of the day, we spoke about the fact that husbands also go through a hard time, but he will never be able to experience that ever in his life. Never in his lifetime will he be able to go through what we went through. And that in itself should make us feel so crazily sexy. And it doesn't, because of the media and the stories that have been told to us about women's bodies and how they're supposed to
You're
look.
making me feel empowered, yeah.
But that is how it should make us feel. We should be like, I am woman. Like, look at me. I just gave birth. Like, so what that there's an extra few pounds on me? I do not care. I do not care because I just did something incredible, and you should be lavishing these extra pounds. You should be kissing my stomach for all I know. Because
I love it.
How incredible is the thing that we just did?
And it is incredible. And you should feel very, very proud of every single part of that body, because it is an absolute miracle. And even breastfeeding, like I said, it can have an impact, but even that by itself is a serious miracle, what your body can be doing. And we should feel, and I mean, I'm feeling really empowered at the moment. I love it. What are some other things that we can do before we run out of time, to help get the spark back? I mean, we now talked a lot about just after birth, but I mean, there's a long period after birth. What are some things? Should we be scheduling sex? What should we be doing? What can we do to help keep the spark alive with our partners?
So I would say one of two things. The first thing is that you need to prioritize your healing. You need to prioritize your mental, emotional well-being, as well as the recovery of this birth. So obviously without professional guidance of maybe pelvic floor therapy, if you're experiencing pain, there should never, ever be pain in a sexual experience. If there is, something is not right. I can't stand when people say, oh no, it's okay if it's a little bit painful the first time. It should never, ever be painful. There is a space for discomfort, but not for pain. And therefore, if she's experiencing that, prioritize that recovery first.
Okay. We're going to get into that, unfortunately, just now, after the break.
This is Bump and Beyond with Yolandi Becker, the show about pregnancy and babies. 101.9 megahertz of life.
Yes, it is Bump and Beyond, and it has been a fantastic show today with Galya Falkson, a sex and relationship coach. And please do go listen to the podcast. But before we officially run out of time, she was finishing her thought, because we need to have those, what do we have to do to get the spark back into a relationship? You were just now saying, Galya, that we first have to be emotionally healed and ready after this whole process. What's some of the other tips and tricks we can get to keep the spark alive? Because it's work. It takes work to do it.
So I would say exploring other ways to express yourself physically, like we said, massage, bubble baths, recreating those high school makeout sessions, if you did that. If you're religious, obviously not. Well, create those. The more new sexual roads you travel together, the more your feelings about your body will evolve and your attitudes will shift. Your experience of sexual pleasure will be in a continual state of flux, but your right to pleasure is constant. And no one can assert that right as well as you can. So what does that mean? You are now adjusting to your new roles. You need to be honest and open with one another, right? I can give you some tips and pointers to start that conversation by saying to your partner, the most exciting sexual moment with you that we've had was, in my opinion, what was yours? The part of my body when you touch or I'm feeling the most self-conscious about is here, maybe to touch there less, or to be more aware of how I'm feeling when you're touching that part of my body. The thing about sex that I'm most uncomfortable with right now is X, Y, and Z. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm experiencing. And my favorite part of sex with you is. So to be focusing on the things that have worked, the things that don't work, excluding those things. Don't try to bring them back in the bedroom. and
I love that. Getting that conversation started is so important for the relationship and the intimacy. It brings you next level.
You need to be clear and direct, but at the same time being sensitive and compassionate. So it's hard for a lot of people to do that, to be clear and direct without being aggressive or angry. And I would say that the way to change that is by using I statements, right? So I feel insecure in my new body, or I'm struggling to feel sexual desire right now, instead of we never have sex. What's wrong with you?
Don't you find me attractive anymore?
Exactly. Or him to say, can you just get over yourself and stop being so exhausted all the time, or stop saying no all the time? I don't know, whatever someone would say. I think firstly, putting yourself into other person's shoes, in the sense that you're both new parents, you're both going through a lot right now, and helping yourself see their perspective. That's the first thing. The second thing. And yes, you asked, should we schedule sex? I think that scheduling sex is part of that talk. When you're having that talk, like what is going to work for us, what's not, scheduling sex could actually be the game changer and help couples reignite that spark, because they're actually just making it a priority. Like we said, prioritize your healing, but also prioritize your pleasure. That doesn't just mean I'm going to have sex and that's the only way I'm prioritizing my pleasure. That means you both enjoy things together. You have fun together. You enjoy each other's company. You laugh together. You watch something funny together. You eat ice cream and you enjoy every taste and you savor every bite. That reigniting that part of our brain to enjoy pleasure again, it really allows us to want to have more of it. So to just deepen your understanding of yourself as a sensual being and explore new levels of intimacy with your partner. And by having those conversations about sex, you will find that medium. You'll be able to say, well, babe, these days with the baby, sex at night is absolutely it's not a possibility for me. I honestly feel like I am doing a massive chore and I hate it, but with sex in the afternoon, that would be really good for me because like I've just had my shower or whatever for the day, you've just helped me with the baby, or baby's having a sleep. This is a good time to prioritize it. So you schedule it. Yes. Scheduling helps actually prioritize it and say, you're important to me. And sometimes it doesn't have to be a whole night of sexual intercourse. It can just be a night of sensual massages or a night of something to ease into it, to get yourselves back into a place of being comfortable with each other's bodies. To schedule sex after not having sex for a really long time can be quite daunting for a lot of couples. It's like, I now have to be in the mood for you. Like,
Yes.
But if you schedule sensual massages or a lovely, date in the playroom on the playmat,
Galya, I'm blaming Craig for this situation, and he's okay with it. He gave me a thumbs up. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. Please go follow Galya Falkson on. Her details will be there on our website, but for sure go follow her on Instagram. She has so many helpful insights and videos that she has available to help you create those intimacy. And like she said, and how I said in the beginning, if you're not doing it for yourself, do it for your kids, because a relationship is the basis of everything for your marriage and for your children. It's been such a great time with you today. Join me next week as we're talking attachment with our children with Nolene Rest. It's been a wonderful time with you. Thank you for joining me. Until next time, enjoy your day.